Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for what is sure to be a compelling conversation on the critical need for investment from all sources, public, private, philanthropic, academic, and corporate, in the capital infrastructure of the early care and education system. I am Samantha Kupferman of West End Strategy Team in Washington, D.C., and I have had the immense pleasure of working with Friends Center for Children in New Haven, Connecticut for the past couple of years. A little bit of background on Friends Center. Friends Center opened in 2007 and now serves 158 children across currently 2 sites in New Haven, with a third opening in just a couple of weeks. Friends Center's 4th site is also in planning stages and will open in May of 2026. At that point, Friends Center will serve 226 children ages 3 months until they enter kindergarten. 70% of the Friends Center community at the child, parent, teacher, and leadership level are people of color. To ensure there is no socioeconomic majority, Friends Center maintains a sliding scale tuition model and accepts federal and state subsidies, including Care for Kids, school readiness, daycare grants, and early Head Start. As you all know, the early care and education system is in crisis. So we're here today to talk about the infrastructural investments, and we'll explain what that means later, that will improve the quality of, access to, and affordability of our country's early care and education system. One piece of that puzzle is supporting the early learning workforce. Friends Center for Children's first and still only of its kind that we know of teacher housing initiative is increasing teachers' compensation through the salaried benefit of rent-free housing. I should clarify that I am not Lilia Luciano, an Emmy Award-winning CBS News anchor and correspondent who was originally going to moderate today. She was pulled away on a story, but I am thrilled to be here in her place. Before we begin, I just want to take the opportunity to highlight the detailed look that Lilia reported into Friends Center for Children's Teacher Housing Initiative earlier this year. I encourage all of you to watch that segment if you haven't seen it already, and the link will be shared in the chat. So let's get right to it. I will introduce our panelists, ask each of them a few questions, and we'll have a conversation that we really hope will be a starting point for communities and investment sources across the country to consider what infrastructural investment in childcare may mean for you locally. Throughout the conversation, we will share some useful links in the chat, so please keep an eye. Please feel free to submit any questions you have via the Q&A function, and we will share a recording afterward. We are thrilled to have with us today Representative Rosa DeLauro, a Congresswoman from Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District. The Congresswoman serves as ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee, where she is the House lead on strengthening funding for child care programs. And at the core of her work is her fight for America's working families, including our infants and toddlers. Representative DeLauro is a staunch advocate for our nation's children because she understands that investing in our children in their early years enhances their development and leads to success in later years. Thank you for all you have done to fight for increased funding for Head Start, the most effective early childhood development program ever developed. Next, we have Paris Pierce, who joined Friends Center as a preschool teacher in 2019. An assistant teacher, she enjoys helping children learn in new ways and guiding breakthroughs in their development. Paris was one of the very first teachers to become a resident in Friends Center for Children's Teacher Housing Initiative. She and her 3 children live rent-free in a home provided by Friends Center. This program connects residents with a financial coach to help them reach personal financial goals, reduce financial stress, and allow teachers to focus their time on personal and professional development. Paris, as I said, is the mother of 3, including 1 enrolled at Friends Center, who she gets to see every day while she's at work. Dr. Karen DuBois-Walton is a visionary leader dedicated to empowering communities through education, advocacy, and equitable development. As the president of Elm City Communities Housing Authority of the City of New Haven for the past 17 years, she has spearheaded initiatives to address systemic inequities in housing and community development, education, and economic access and opportunity. She has recently been named the incoming president and CEO of the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven, a role she will assume in November 2024. Thank you for being with us. And finally, we have Allyx Schiavone, the driving force behind Friends Center for Children's rapid growth and innovation, where she has served as executive director since 2009. To address the childcare crisis, Allyx has developed several initiatives at Friends Center that serve as a model to the early care and education industry nationwide. Coming to Friends Center with a Bank Street College education, Allyx is also a community, state, and national advocate, including through her role as co-chair of the Child Care for Connecticut's Future Coalition. As I said earlier, under her leadership, Friends Center is expanding to 4 locations across New Haven and now serves as a national model for what is possible in transforming an underfunded and overburdened national childcare system. This year, Allyx led Friends Center for Children to be recognized with a 2024 Yale University Seton Elm Ivy Award and to be selected as an Accelerate Track finalist for the 2024 Saul Zaentz Early Education Innovation Challenge, which is coming up later this month. I'd like to start with you, Representative DeLauro. You place America's families at the center of your work. Why is childcare so important to America's working families?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you to all of you and to you, Samantha, for the question and for leading the conversation today. But I want to say a thank you to my fellow panelists who I'll use first names and no titles, but to Allyx and to Karen and Paris and others who will be on. Many, many thanks. What a great body of knowledge and expertise is gathered here today to address this issue of why. The short answer to why childcare is so important for me is that nothing works without it. Yeah. Nothing works without it. People in America struggle today. They live paycheck to paycheck. Many have multiple jobs, juggle unpredictable schedules to keep up with the rising cost of living. And parents who cannot afford childcare are often unable then to take a job they would prefer or that would pay them better. And so they are forced to choose. They have to choose between taking care of their children during the day or providing for them. And that's the conundrum. So you had a recent study with researchers at Yale and Brown. They studied public school provided childcare programs in New Haven. And what they found is that every dollar spent on a program providing free full-time daycare for preschoolers generated $6 in economic benefits. Most of that return came from extra pay that parents could earn because they had additional hours of care for their kids. In other words, childcare not only pays for itself, it pays for the rest of us as well. So we should be investing at federal, state, local levels. As a member of Congress, I have worked to try to address the deficit in child care funding and facilities. That's one of my top priorities. Just very, very briefly, 2015, what we did was we increased the funding for child care and for Head Start by $6.3 billion. It was a 250% increase. This year, in a tight budget environment, we secured $1 billion increase for childcare and for Head Start. So the funding expands access to childcare and invests in the childcare workforce. I must mention one other thing, and that is the expanded and improved child tax credit. Monthly checks to families delivered the largest middle class tax cut in a generation. Many families then were able to afford childcare. And to the naysayers who said they would not go to work, if they had the child tax credit, to the contrary, what they did was they purchased childcare so that they could go to work. And so we're working to make this a permanent in the next go round. And I'm proud to say that the Vice President Harris has made it the centerpiece of an economic plan. And my former colleague, Tim Walz, has already implemented a child tax credit in Minnesota. But look, as irreplaceable as federal funding is for long-term success, we need to be encouraging innovative solutions that help individual communities meet the unique local challenges, which includes, as what is really showcased here is the need for affordable housing for childcare workers. And this is precisely the work that Allyx and Paris are doing at the Friends Center. Rent-free housing for teachers to work on site, address the cost of living. What an innovative model. There's nowhere else in the country that we are doing this. So that's why it has the national media attention, and it needs to get more media attention. So my view is with proper funding, we can use existing infrastructure to create more space for children and for families. We need more innovative approaches like this, including public-private partnerships. Let's make the most of available funding, bring in private companies who have an interest in providing childcare solutions for their employees. And that is very prominent today with employers wanting to look for ways to deal with their employees. Very simply, I'll go back to where I started. Nothing works without childcare.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Absolutely. I'm sure everyone on agrees with that. Thank you. And thank you for your ongoing work on this important issue. So to expand on that, Allyx, I'm going to turn to you. Talk to us broadly about what is impacting access to childcare.
That's an easy question. Literally every policy everywhere is designed to impede access to childcare. So I'm not sure that's really what you meant by the question. So I'll be a little more nuanced in my framing. But I think before I do that, I do want to acknowledge and appreciate my fellow panel members. And thank you, Rosa, Congresswoman Rosa, for your framing, because it's right on point. So to answer your question, really lack of access to childcare is based on three what I would call practical issues. The cost is too high for American families. There's not enough supply for the number of children who need to be served. And the childcare workforce is underpaid. Nationally, early care and education teachers earn $30,000 per year. So if we know those are the practical pieces, then we need to really examine the reasons for these barriers. What is the underlying cause? And I believe they're based on our ingrained societal views around young women, young children, women, and especially people of color. Our workforce is 98% female and disproportionately women of color. And we have a system that devalues the people who care for the youngest version of ourselves by paying them to live in poverty. So the base of our entire system is unstable. Another reason is that as a country, we do not yet see childcare as a public good. We have very outdated views. So because of that, because we don't see that, we have very outdated views of what family means. And we believe that children should not be cared for outside the family. And I can give you a really fascinating example of this. So in 1971, I was 1 year old. At the time, we were in the middle of coming to the end, I should say, of the Vietnam War, and we had an extremely robust childcare system in our country because women had to step in while men were away at war. Women had to step in to keep our country running, and so they created a childcare system because in order for them to work, they needed childcare. And the House and the Senate created legislation that would have created a public childcare system. And Nixon, who was the president at the time, vetoed it because he said it would, quote, destroy the family unit. So now we fast forward 50 years and it's 2021, literally 50 years to the day almost. And Biden and the House championed a childcare policy that would have guaranteed every family in the US with childcare options to meet their needs. And the Senate at that time would not support it because they said it would, quote, destroy the family unit. The exact same framing from 50 years ago. So the same argument 50 years apart, because many people still believe that taking care of children is the mother's work. And if you create space for women in the workforce, it will, quote, ruin the family. So I really believe that's what's truly impacting access or impeding access to childcare is our deep-rooted societal views around race and gender roles. It seems that's sort of where I see things.
Samantha, if I might just for a moment, I think you're just right on point, and I'm going to give you another example, which goes back even further than when you were 1 year old. And that goes back to the Second World War. There was a woman, Congresswoman, Mary Norton of New Jersey. She was the first Democratic woman elected to the Congress. She fought for and helped pass the Community Facilities Act of 1942, which made families, regardless of income, eligible for 6 days of child care per week at an affordable cost. She created the first universal child care system in the United States. At the end of the war, it was disbanded because it goes back to something that Allyx was talking about. The view is that then women were no longer in the factories, and they were keeping the economy going. And at the same time, now they were out of that workforce. Therefore, they should go back home and take care of children. And it should be that's the way our society that our society runs. For me, for my childcare, when my mother worked in the old sweatshops in New Haven and my dad worked, I went to my grandmother's pastry store with aunts, cousins, etc. No longer available in our society. Aunts, uncles, grandmothers, everybody's in the workforce. So that kind of situation no longer exists, but it is still ingrained in the minds, and particularly today, I want you to know there is a proposal to eliminate Head Start that we're going to have to fight in the next several months. But the sense is that this is not the responsibility of the federal government, first and foremost. Right. And secondly, this is a family matter. It should be taken up with the family, and women bear that responsibility.
Yeah.
Thank you for that historical context. It's really helpful and fascinating to hear how things have evolved over time in a direction that probably many of us would have expected to be the opposite. So given the challenges that you've both laid out, Allyx, can you speak to us about where at Friends Center you've found solutions?
Yeah, and I just want to echo something that Rosa brought up, which is, in my belief, like, in order to solve this childcare crisis, we have to see it as a public good. And once we see it as a public good, we have to invest in it with public funding. And that's the only way we're going to make this affordable for families, and so that teachers can earn a livable wage. And to underscore what we're losing, so by not having a thriving, functioning 0 to 3 system, we lose $122 billion annually. $122 billion annually. That's families that lose $78 billion per year in work income, businesses that lose $23 billion in productivity because they don't have workers, and taxpayers, us, that lose $21 billion each year on the taxes of the people who are working and the businesses. And I generally think most people agree when they talk about like how to solve this crisis, that we must have more public funding. My wonderings and framing really that I want to talk about today is, what do these investments look like? And I believe there's a powerful and transformative role that infrastructure, so brick and mortar, can play in solving this childcare crisis. So for me, it's about choosing to invest in infrastructure because it's a smarter way for us to infuse money into the system for a lot of reasons, but most significantly, it allows us to spend less annually, but earn more annually, and then build equity in our system. And I think there are 3 pathways that really we need to think about to secure early care and education. One is stabilizing home-based childcare providers. And we would do that through home ownership. The second is investing in the capital infrastructure of center-based child care providers. And the third is the free teacher housing that we've talked about. So supporting the early learning workforce through free teacher housing. And I think to really be able to understand what those means, we need to unpack them a little bit. So let's talk about home-based childcare providers. They are a critical need in our childcare infrastructure system. We cannot deliver childcare in this country without thinking about family-based childcare, home-based childcare providers. Right now, since 2019, we lose 1 in every 10 home-based providers. We are losing providers faster than we are adding them, even though the demand for their care is outrageous. And the reason why is that the sustainability of their business model is not reasonable. The costs are too high, and their income is too low. And so we have to change the economic model. And what I believe that means is we have to create a path to home ownership and financial stability for them. And so we're calling on public or private entities to purchase, renovate, and offer rent-free housing to providers committed to operating high-quality home-based childcare. And they would do that for a fixed period of time, at which point the ownership of the home would transfer to the provider. And so this is an issue that sort of is the intersectionality of housing and childcare. It would also be about transfer of wealth and property to home-based childcare providers who are historically under-resourced, underburdened, women of color. And we have a model to do this in Connecticut. We just don't think about it. We have something called bond funds. So Friend Center's first building, for example, in 2014, we received 1.75 million in bond funds to partially cover the cost of our center. The stipulation was that we had to stay in the business of childcare for 10 years. And each year, 10% of that cost would roll off. And we would own 10% of the building. So we're doing this already for center-based. Why can't we then transfer this to home-based providers? So I believe that the same funding mechanism could be used to purchase family childcare homes and enhance our family childcare structure. The second piece we talked about was investing in the capital infrastructure of center-based childcare providers. So Friend Center currently owns 2 of our 4 sites, and we rent the other 2. And for when we rent a site, a large portion of our income goes to rent. For example, we pay $90,000 in rent in one of our sites, and we have 9 teachers. If we did not have to pay rent, we could pay those educators $10,000 more overnight. And we believe that municipalities and governments should share the burden of the cost of childcare infrastructure by creating tax incentives for regional developments or developers. For example, again, where we live, we have a tremendous amount of economic growth in the form of large building developments. If we as a municipality made it a requirement of developments over a certain threshold, it could be 50 million, 100 million, that they had to include community childcare space in their planning, in their physical planning, and it would be offset by a tax credit from federal, state, or local government, we could create the physical infrastructure needed to solve one part of the access issue, physical space. These same tax credits could be given based on the space on an annual basis for the leasing of a portion of this development to community childcare programs at below market rent or no rent, so that providers would be able to recoup the rental costs and invest it into lowering costs for families, thus offering a partial solution to another access issues, family fees. And then the next thing that we think is a critical piece of infrastructure is our housing work, because that's how you solve the teacher compensation issue. And I think in order to really look at that, I just want to dispel a myth that we talk about our system, and it really, I'm trying to think of polite language. It really irritates me. We often say that childcare is not subsidized. And what we mean is it's not subsidized by the government. However, our current childcare system is subsidized on the backs of the teachers. $30,000 is not a living wage anywhere in our country. So our teacher housing initiative supports these teachers so that we can elevate their compensation through the salaried benefit of free housing. And this is how it works. We purchase housing units with a one-time cost for us as a program. We then offer free housing to the educators as a salaried benefit. For the teacher, this means that their salaried benefit jumps from $43,000 to $63,000 overnight. Currently, we offer housing to 8 teachers and 8 dependents. And by 2028, we want to offer free housing as a salaried benefit to 24 teachers, which will be 1/3 of our workforce. It will translate to somewhere between 60 to 70 New Haven residents with free housing. And it will result in a $550,000 annual salary savings for Friend Center, which then translates to just under a 15% return on our capital investment. So bottom line, with a single infusion of funds, we can better support early educators, raise salaries, and enhance classroom quality. We need to be thinking about infrastructure as it relates to budgets and its pathway, and a pathway that has the ability to have a profound effect on the childcare crisis. The real benefit of this, it's one-time funding instead of ongoing annual costs. What we need to do as a collective, we need to be willing to see a pathway forward before it's been laid. And that's where we are right now.
Thank you for laying all of that out, those innovative ideas that I know some are already in the works, and these are replicable ideas that communities could customize and personalize for where you are and what sorts of revenue sources might be available. I want to bring Paris Pierce into the conversation. Thanks for being here with us today. Can you just talk about what has access to rent-free housing meant for you and your family and your role as a teacher?
First I would say majorly housing security. I can just bring it back to my apartment before this moving into this house. I had to use 2 of my paychecks to pay my rent. So without paying rent, it has been means that I get to save money, which I call a rainy day fund. My children get to participate in extra curriculum activities. It gives me a better quality of life. It allows me to show up to work being my best self without having to worry about how I'm gonna make ends meet. I get to provide my children with what they need and have a little bit of extra money. So it has been wonderful.
Thank you. Representative DeLauro, did you want to say anything?
I just think it's so well said. And if you think about this, and I'm waiting to hear about Karen, who knows so much about the housing business
Yeah.
and so many other things, the philanthropic world. But housing security, quality of life, economic security for myself and my family.
My children don't have to watch me struggle.
What is wrong? What is
Why
so
can't we
out
do
of
this?
reach?
Yeah. Right.
Why can't that not be done? And as I think about it, and if you think about what you're talking about, and if you dovetail with a child tax credit,
Yeah. You change
you
completely.
change people's lives.
Yeah.
And then you don't have people who are looking at food stamps and all kinds of other efforts, but can deal with childcare, with healthcare, with basic essentials, with maybe providing your kid with, some sort of recreation, joining a club, being able to go on a trip and something. What is wrong with that? And why is it that we cannot find the role for both government and, the private side to invest in this kind of effort in this country? I find it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, let's look at some of those root causes.
Right.
So, Karen, this is where we're fortunate to have your expertise. When we think about paths to equity and inclusivity, a lack of affordable housing is so often chief among the obstacles that our communities and our individuals face. So can you talk about how the housing crisis intersects with the childcare crisis?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for including my voice in this panel with my friends here. I thought about, as I heard my Congresswoman say, nothing works without it. I will say the same thing for housing, that is quality and that you can afford. Nothing in our lives works without knowing that we have a place of our choice that is quality, that we can afford, where we can lay our house, where we can lay our heads at night, where we can tuck our children in at night. And the amount of anxiety and worry that exists in people's lives, as Paris shared so beautifully here today, when you are worried about that, about being able to provide for yourself and for your family. It crowds out the ability to focus on so many of the other important things that we need to do. And so the work we've been doing at Elm City Communities, which is the housing authority for the city of New Haven, has been ensuring that families across the city have quality, affordable places to live, and that from there, then they have the opportunity to fulfill their goals. And we are only scratching the surface because we are not reaching all of the families that need to have housing that's affordable. And so we are constantly looking for other ways to help families and other innovative ways to address this. We came into the work around this intersection between equality, early ed and housing, because one, we were trying to develop really quality places so that kids could get off to the right start, and so that's part of what we're doing in housing. But two, we were working with families who wanted to advance, who wanted to go back to school, who wanted to take on more hours, and they needed a quality place where they knew that they could leave their child for good education and care. And so we really got into thinking about this with our families and got into advocacy, and it led to some innovative programming that we started ourselves to help to meet that goal. Here in this community in New Haven, There is a housing wage that's been calculated as the amount that you need to be earning in order to be able to rent, not a luxury place, just a modest
Baseline.
apartment. And it's currently in New Haven is $35 an hour, which if you equate that to an annual salary, gets you to something like $78,000 a year. You heard the salaries that I think it was Allyx mentioned earlier, that your average childcare worker is earning in the range of $30,000. Friend Center is able to do better than that, but they are still nowhere near what it costs without any help to be able to rent just a decent place. Again, I'm not talking about a luxury place in this community. And so we have a housing crisis that's at play. We have a childcare crisis that is at play, and it's putting hardworking families like Paris and like the thousands of other Paris-like families that I serve every day. It's putting them in really difficult situations. It led us to do an innovative partnership that offered free housing in our teacher in residence program. And it's one of the things that the Friend Center initiative is modeled after, something that we started in 2016. And in that, we took one of our units of affordable housing that we offer, we took it offline, and we used it for an educator in our community, because we recognize that educators aren't making the kind of money that they should make based upon the work that they do, and they could benefit from that. And we recognize the value that an educator plays in community. To have an educator in our community next door helped to create a culture of academic achievement. It helped create a bridge between families and school that they could sort of knock on the door and get some help and advice from. It provided a resource right in the community of kids who could come after school. And so in our model, instead of paying rent, the teacher office offers services to our community. It's one of those sort of ideas that leads to us thinking outside of the box, beyond the box, about how do we actually reduce the cost of living for our educators so that their check goes farther, while we do the important fight to make sure that their income does go up, that they do actually, right? We don't want to leave it at this point, because they deserve to get paid a salary that reflects the importance and the value and the quality of the work that they do.
Yeah, I love that. I really want to echo that and just say it's not in lieu of, it's it's an addition to. And I say this often to the educators at Friend Center who are utilizing the housing program. This is not really a benefit. This is what you deserve. And we have been unable to figure out how to pay for it at this level without burdening our families. So this is a workaround for us, but it has a really critical opportunity if we look at it from what is the cash we need to put into the system, and what is that is one time versus what are the cash that we can put onto the system that has a return. And that's really the crux of this thinking, is like, what are our percentages and how are we deciding how much money we're going to put on something that is a one-time cost, has an annual return, versus an annual cost that's every year. And we haven't done that.
As a society, we have to reckon with the fact that we cannot have all of these things be true. We cannot have housing costs skyrocket out of sight.
Yeah.
We cannot have essential functions exist in our community and refuse to pay the people who provide those a living wage, a housing wage that allows them to do it. We cannot allow capitalism to drive things that are actually a public good and need some partnership around. And we have to reckon with that, because we can't have those things happening and then say, but we don't want to put any public money in to help close the gaps.
Yeah.
So we got to moderate housing costs. We got to pay people a wage that allows them to live in this community. And we have to be creative about how public and private come together to help make those things happen and fill some of the gaps.
You know, the thing is that I think it's the conversations that led me to the thought that we often look at these programs as in silos. That we have a childcare problem, there's a housing problem, there's this, and instead of looking at the interconnectedness of all of that as the issue of economic security. That is at the bottom of this. How are we leading people to deal with the cost of living, if you will? That has to do with housing. It has to do with healthcare. It has to do with, but it's all of one piece. It is not, and I think in terms of thinking about the politics of these issues, in terms of getting attention, is the framing of them as a whole piece rather than one at a time. Because what happens is somebody says, well, okay, so we're going to put money into childcare. We can't put the money into the housing sector. We're going to do the housing, so we can't do childcare. So you got, and look, it was said to me when we were dealing with this, what do you want? We can't have it, but you've got to create the structure for people to see it, so that there's the political understanding that what the investment will do in terms of addressing the nature of the problem, which is economic security for families, that helping them to deal with the cost of living and giving them the opportunity to be able to succeed. That you know is
Well,
way we ought to try to approach the issues, I think.
yeah, we are forced into a scarcity mindset. We are forced into it. Our sector is, the housing sector is, the health, you know, we're forced into this mindset that there isn't enough and we can't possibly do it. And you actually kind of have to fight each other for that. And that is, I don't believe that. I just don't believe it's true.
Look, early on when we did the American Rescue Plan, they've said to me, well, Rosa, do you want paid family and medical leave? Do you want the child tax credit? Do you want?
You can't have both, right?
Yes.
You know, you can't, and housing. If you, Karen, you know, you talked to Maxine Waters today. That got frozen out. We were got given only 6 months of the or a year of the child tax credit, and we got a smattering of paid family and medical leave. It is now my view, the ability to try to create, if you will, a new social safety net. You know, when I looked at the social safety net years ago, it was a creation of Democrats and Republicans understanding the challenges the country was facing. And while they were different, they came to some conclusions that dealt with, you know, Medicare, Social Security, workman's comp, a whole variety of things. Well, it's a new time. It's a new age. There are differences in what's going on in the lives of people today. And that has to do with childcare and with housing issues, and you know, with paid leave. These kinds of efforts now about who's in the workforce, etc. It's all of a new piece, which I think we need to address in that way in order to be able to solve, you know, begin to solve some of these issues. Yeah.
Well, you know, I can't help but have a little of my new philanthropy hat on, and you know, I think about the fact that, you know, historically we have thought of the model that things get piloted and tried in other space, prove that they're successful, and then they get picked up by the public sector and invested in. And we saw, unfortunately, what we saw during the pandemic, when amazing things happened, successfully things happened, we didn't see that translate into, so let's keep it going. We know how many kids were lifted out of poverty, and yet that with the child tax credit, and yet that didn't result in continued action. We know how many people's housing was saved by eviction moratorium and more dollars going in, and yet we haven't found the political will to keep those things happening. I just know, working with a powerhouse like Allyx and the Friend Center, that there's an opportunity to demonstrate and show what's happened when we do something like this. And that my hope for rallying and getting more and more people on board is that we get more and more voices forcing that this does become something that's a model for
making that connection,
private partnership going forward, and to be picked up.
And I want to be clear that this is about, like, I want to say this to you, Paris, too. Like, I've worked with thousands of families over the course of my career. I have never met a family, a guardian, whoever it may be, who says, I would like my teacher to be marginalized, underfunded, overwhelmed, burnt out, have to have 3 jobs, need to do that. I mean, there's no one who thinks that way who is in relationship with the teacher. And so the question is, how do we translate that mindset into votes? How do we translate that mindset into votes so that then the people who are decision makers are going to honor the belief that that individual, that educator is valuable. That's the work.
That's a really helpful segue to come back to Paris. And I'd just like to talk a little bit more with you. If you can share a little bit more about what it's like to be an early educator today. We all know that it's hard, but you're the only one of us doing it every day. And we see so many who, are pushed out of the field, deciding to pursue other career paths, for various reasons. So what makes you stay?
I believe it's my deep passion for making a meaningful impact in my friends' lives. I love children. I love loving on them. I love seeing their aha moments. I think this is what I was called to do, honestly. Yeah, I could recall having a job before this who paid so much more money, but that's not what I see myself waking up doing every day. That didn't bring me joy. Working with these friends, it brings me joy. It's just what I love to do. And if I would just encourage other educators to stay on board. We're making a lasting difference in these children's lives. Even when the challenging seems overwhelming, just stay on board. They need us.
Right. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
The friends
And
are lucky to have you.
well said, Paris is also really good at it. It's not just,
Yeah.
like, she's actually a
Wow.
professional and expert at this.
Very powerful.
And I want to just acknowledge that we have devised a system that preys upon people who have a passion for this field. So you heard Paris say she could go somewhere else and make more money and is making a personal choice. I did the same thing, got out of grad school, made $10,000, kept that job. This is in New York with a master's degree. I know it was a long time ago, but still, it's a very small amount of money. I worked at Ann Taylor on the weekends and I started a tutoring service in the evenings because you cannot live on one salary. So, but I stayed in it because I love it. And so it's similar, like we can't have a system where people are staying in it because they believe in the youngest version of ourselves. And we're not then honoring that and giving them a professional, livable wage.
And
I
as
just can't see myself
amazing
working two jobs because
Yeah,
it takes
it's
away
too
from my
hard.
family. It's too hard and it takes away from my family time. We already sleep 8 hours a day, work 8 hours a day. What
Yeah.
what do my kids have left of me?
Yeah, no.
I was just going to say, as amazing of a teacher as you described Paris as, I bet she is so much better now that she's not worried about her economics and she's not having to work another job and she's able to do what she wants with her kids, right? I mean, that's what we
Such
want.
a great security blanket.
That's right.
I get to show up and be my best self,
Yeah.
pour into my professional development and my personal goals. So
Right.
rewarding.
Which we all have a right to do, is to achieve our personal goals
Yeah.
and to have a chance at doing that. And
But with those
and
added
there are-
stresses, it makes it hard.
Yeah.
But the creative solutions that are discussed today, which Allyx, obviously what you're doing here, and Karen, some of the things that you laid out, it is, connecting the dots so that there can be these avenues such as this, which make a tremendous difference in people's lives. And that is, with Paris, being able to engage with youngsters and giving them the time that they need, and just achieves a better
Quality.
education system, better quality, for youngsters to be able to thrive, with a teacher whose mind is just solely focused on, their success.
I
So-
often hear people say preschool is not important. How isn't preschool important? It's the pivotal point in these children's lives. We
Got that
teach
right.
them their social emotional skills, their
Mhm.
problem solving skills. So when they go to kindergarten, they can be ready.
Mhm.
We show
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask your voices, my friend, and I mean this very, very sincerely. I don't, we got so many things that we're talking about here, but I am staring in the face. It's not going to happen because we're not going to let it happen, but you'd have to think about where people will take us. The elimination, not the cutting back, but the elimination of Head Start. It's there in black and white.
Yeah.
It's the program that you want to move forward on an early child. There's no understanding about the value of that program. It's a sense that, okay, this is something that we don't have to have. This is something that the states should take care of, where they're just not going to, they're not going to take care of. And that becomes the external pressure on the system, because that in many of these instances, I tell you, it's more than that. Title I.
Mhm.
It's ultimately the goal to eliminate Title I, which is the bulwark of public education in this country. So, and it's not people put it down in black and white. It's not a wish list. It's a to-do list.
Yeah.
So, and I think we have to be mindful of that in terms of our advocacy around these issues, and be telling the stories about what works here, and getting those stories out to people, what can be done.
So Representative DeLauro, knowing what's going on at the federal level amongst your colleagues, and we know that those goals you just laid out are certainly not your goals.
Right.
If you could wave a magic wand, what is one thing that you would do, or that you could do, or that we hope for, to improve the childcare system immediately?
Well, I go back to something that I think at the end of her comments that Allyx mentioned. I think the greatest barrier, and jump in if you think that's wrong, is when I say an insufficient workforce, it is because not enough workers who want to engage in because of we need to recruit not people who are willing and able to meet the demand. It is really what the pay scale is. It's what the benefits are. If they are the folks who are at the lower end of the totem pole here, or their work is not valued, that is what it comes down to. We all look at our jobs. We all take, a visceral sense of success out of what we're doing, and that what we do is meaningful in some way. And part of that is the way we are valued in our society. Some has to do with how, what our compensation is.
Yeah.
For folks who are not getting paid, they don't have any benefits, and that their work is not valued and respected in our society, and what they mean to the economy, and what they mean to society, what they mean to our children, our most precious commodity.
Yeah.
And we tend to ignore that. So boosting pay, boosting benefits, that is what, making it accessible. It's if you have qualified workers, you've got a system that is functioning. It makes it easier for access. It becomes people. It multiplies. People are willing then to come into the workforce.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right now, how do we recruit? How do you make the argument system-wide to say, yeah, you should spend your life doing this work, where you're actually probably going to be ignored, you're going to be marginalized, you're not going to be respected, and you're going to make poverty level wages in 41 states.
Yeah. You can't take care of your family.
Yeah, that's
Hello.
So I believe that there is a role for infrastructure in solving those issues. And that's sort of what I was talking about earlier today. And so there's a cultural shift that we have to do, which is childcare is a public good. And the argument has been made, meaning it's no longer, it's been proven. It's not even something that, when I started this career, it was like we had to get people to just think about childcare and that it matters. Now the conversation that I find myself in a lot is, okay, we know this matters. We understand brain development now. We understand that this is a public good. We understand the fiscal implications. But what we haven't done is then translate that into investment. So now the question is, how do you speak to decision makers in a language that they feel good about, that they understand, that they can recognize, and that's where I think there's opportunity to talk about infrastructure versus cash in only. And I think there's a role for both.
But during the pandemic, and that was brought up, it pointed up so many things that were really failing in our society. I think Allyx, you've heard me say this before. We saw an airline industry that was going under, and we
Yeah.
said, okay,
We're gonna
that
fix it.
can't happen.
Yeah.
We can't have an airline. It's too important to our
Yeah.
economy to let it go under. And that both had to do with when they crafted the legislation, had to do with the airlines themselves, and it also had to do with the workers, making sure the workers were taken care of in some way. When the automobile industry was on its knees,
Yep.
the response was, my God, too big an industry to not to bail out. Now, that is where the issue of childcare has got to be
Yeah.
up there with an airline industry, an automobile industry, the childcare industry.
Yeah.
That, as I said at the outset, our economy doesn't work without it today. It just
Sure.
doesn't work without it. That has got to be demonstrated in some way. And you have to deal with it on both humanitarian sides. You know what? I always say, if you can't get them on the humanitarian side of the issue of doing something that makes good
Got it.
sense, get them on the nuts and bolts.
On the
You know,
fiscal,
deal
yep,
with the
yep.
dollars.
Yep.
And that's the way to persuade them that what happens to our economy if this fails,
Yep.
you know?
So we're almost at time. I want to ask Alice a question that's actually going to bring in a question that came in from one of our audience members. So first, I guess if you can, I'm going to ask you both at once, then you can answer. If you can talk, we have some interest in hearing a little bit more about how the initial investment in the rent-free teacher housing initiative was funded and how and what funding has looked like since then, what the various forms of that, if you can speak to that. And then if you can move toward really thinking about, in your mind, what does transformation look like in terms of a fundamental shift in how the childcare system is funded and invested in? So we can look at the
Yeah.
teacher housing initiative as one project, but bigger picture.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to need the second question again, maybe, but we'll start with the first because, so we actually, for our teacher housing initiative, we went to what I would call forward thinking and very investment savvy donors. And we said, here's a way that we can solve a crisis that we're having, which is we insist on raising teacher salaries. We do not feel comfortable asking women to show up every day and do the work they do, women and men, I should say, show up every day and do the work they do without compensating them more. And we determined that without federal or state or local investment, the only other way to do that was to raise parent tuition. And we determined that parents couldn't pay anymore. So we were kind of stuck. And we went to these donors and we said, okay, so you can either invest in us on an annual basis. I need X thousands of dollars, $20,000 per teacher to be able to raise their salaries. And I need that every year for as long as we're in operation. Or would you consider investing in a house that we can purchase and it'll give us an annualized return forever, minus obviously the minor costs for upkeep. And it became a really easy decision because you're talking about $20,000 for 3 teachers, so $60,000 a year forever, or you're talking about, in this case, we purchased a home for $275,000, and we have the return forever. So it became, that's really how we did it. We made the economic argument to one of our savvy donors. The second question, I think, was, what would transformation look like in how we fund childcare system? Is that right, Sam? Just as
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think there are sort of 3 steps to transformation. One, we've talked about this a lot today. The United States needs to value early care and education as a public good. We didn't used to do this for K through 12. We didn't do it for high school. Like, we've evolved, right? 100 years ago, we made high school a public good. So there's precedent for us shifting our thinking. It needs to be done quickly. The second thing is that, and this is really where the infrastructure conversation comes in, is I think decision and policymakers need to change the way we think about funding early care and education from what we're doing now, which is really only considering annual investments, And I would like to see that shift to a disciplined, proactive approach to funding that includes infrastructure investments. So what that looks like is programs, funders, policymakers, governments, philanthropic organizations need a thoughtful, planned, calculated approach to the way we spend allocated dollars so that a certain percentage of each year has two categories of funding. One is cash into the system that has no annualized return. That would look like increasing subsidies, which we have to do, right? But it's an increasing subsidy. You're not going to really, you have to do it every year. You have to pay the same amount every year. Or two, the second way is purchasing or building infrastructure that is a one-time cost that would produce an annualized return. And if we can do that and we can say, okay, we're going to spend 80% of our dollars this year on annualized costs and 20% on infrastructure that's going to have a return, and we sort of look at that balance very carefully over years, you will start to see it shift. And that means we put less cash into the system, which is the argument that we as a country, not we, but decision makers are making. It's too expensive. We can't do that. So it's a workaround, and it builds equity in the system. So I think when those three things happen, the landscape will look completely different and we can all retire. So I would appreciate if you'd all hurry up, because I want to start collecting bottle caps or whatever it is I'm going to do when I retire. So that's sort of how I see it.
Thank you. This has been such an enlightening conversation. I know we're almost just at time, so I want to just open the floor to any of our amazing panelists today. If there's any last thoughts you'd like to share with our audience.
I would just put the appeal out for other like-minded, wonderful, progressive philanthropists who want to step forward into this. I think there's such great opportunity for public-private partnership on this while we continue to move the needle. And I was hoping you were going to ask all of us for the magic wand question.
Yes, please. We have a few minutes, Karen, go for it.
If we as a country could deal with the overwhelming racism and sexism that's baked into the reasons why we undervalue this profession, that would have impact on so many other issues that we're dealing with. And my magic wand would create enough quality care spaces for everyone that needs it, and enough funding to pay every educator what they're worth for delivering that quality service.
You could have my magic wand too, Karen. Maybe it'll work if you have two. I agree.
But
I agree. Quality, affordable childcare, universally accessible.
That's it. And the case has got to be made. And this is a moment to make it. And people who are engaged in this effort, and it doesn't only include the people who are engaged in early childhood, but the business community, the philanthropic community, everyone else has to demonstrate the value and that public good that can come out of this. And this is foundational. This is foundational if we are looking at where we want our kids to go in the future. And that if we're not dealing with universal childcare and early childhood education, then we are going to shortchange not only, that means the youngsters first and foremost, but we're going to shortchange our ability and our competitiveness for the future. That should stick in the minds of some of these very, very large philanthropists who understand the value of what we need to do by way of investment, and they can be helpful in making the case for public investment.
Absolutely.
Believe me, and so can the business community make a difference in that effort. So you're great, guys. Thank you. Wow, what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Allyx, Paris, Karen, Congresswoman DeLauro, for all the ideas, innovations, inspirations that you've shared. I really hope, I know I am, and I hope our audience is taking away some tools and concepts that are going to be, make sense and be meaningful in your own communities, wherever you may be across the country. I think that's my takeaway here is, we have we have 4 Connecticut voices with us. Of course, we have Representative DeLauro in Congress too. And that's what I'm taking away, that there's so much going on in Connecticut, but all of this could be done anywhere with the right ideas and people and partnerships coming together. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation today. It was really my privilege to be able to be part of it. Everyone, please check out friendscenterforchildren.org to learn more. There's some links in the chat that my colleagues have shared. If anyone has any questions, additional questions, we'd be happy to follow up with you directly afterward. Best to email friendscenter@westendstrategy.com. Thank you to everyone, and hope to connect with all of you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.